There's a fascinating prophecy about Israel, Ishmael, and the end times that often goes unnoticed compared to the more well-known biblical prophecies, such as the mark of the beast or the rebuilding of the third temple. This overlooked mystery involves the ancient conflict between Isaac and Ishmael, which seems to have prophetic implications for the last days. Before we start, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy our video, please hit the like button. This will help us reach more people and create content for you. Now let's get started with today's video. In biblical prophecy, much attention is given to topics such as the mark of the beast, the Antichrist, and the rebuilding of the third temple. However, one prophecy that remains largely overlooked concerns the ancient conflict between Israel and Ishmael, a conflict that appears to have profound implications for the end times. This article explores how the biblical narrative of Ishmael and Isaac shapes modern geopolitical realities and how their descendants may play a crucial role in the final events of human history. 1. The ancient conflict, Isaac versus Ishmael. To understand the significance of Ishmael and Israel in prophecy, we must go back to the book of Genesis. Ishmael was the firstborn son of Abraham, born through Hagar, the Egyptian handmaid of Sarah, Genesis 16 verses 1 to 4. However, God had promised Abraham a son through his wife Sarah, and Isaac was later born, Genesis 21 verses 1 to 3. Despite being Abraham's firstborn, Ishmael was not the child of promise. Instead, God's covenant was established with Isaac, Genesis 17 verses 19 to 21. Ishmael was, however, given a separate blessing, Genesis 16 verses 10 to 12, 17:20, where God prophesied that he would become a great nation but also that he would be a wild man, living in hostility with his brothers. Genesis 25 verse 18 states, his descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the eastern border of Egypt, as you go toward Ashur. And they lived in hostility toward all the tribes related to them. This tension between Ishmael's descendants, traditionally identified with Arab nations, and Isaac's descendants, Israel, has continued for millennia and is manifesting again in modern times in ways that could be directly tied to end times prophecy. 2. Ishmael and Israel in biblical prophecy. Many scholars believe that the descendants of Ishmael, commonly associated with Arab nations, play a role in the events leading to the second coming of Christ. Psalm 83 War. This passage describes a coalition of nations that attempt to destroy Israel. Some theologians argue that many of the nations listed, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, correlate with modern Arab nations. Ezekiel 38-39. The Gog and Magog war. Some interpretations suggest that Islamic nations, many of whom trace lineage to Ishmael, will play a role in a future war against Israel. Isaiah 21. The burden of Arabia. Some connect this passage to future judgment upon Ishmael's descendants, leading to the fall of a great power in the Middle East. 3. The Middle East conflict, a prophetic fulfillment? Today's Middle Eastern turmoil is often seen as the outworking of this ancient prophecy. The conflict between Israel and the surrounding Arab nations continues to intensify. Jerusalem remains a focal point of dispute between Jews, Muslims, and Christians, as prophesied in Zechariah 12 verse 3. On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. The recent Abraham Accords attempted to create peace between Israel and some Arab nations, but biblical prophecy warns that a false peace will precede sudden destruction. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3. Could the growing alliances and conflicts between Ishmael's and Isaac's descendants be setting the stage for an ultimate showdown in the end times? 4. Mystery Babylon, a connection to Ishmael's descendants? Revelation 17-18 describes Mystery Babylon, a powerful entity influencing global trade, wealth, and spiritual corruption. Some scholars speculate that Saudi Arabia, home of Mecca, Islam's holiest city, could be a candidate for Mystery Babylon. Revelation 18 verse 3 describes a place that has enriched the nations through trade, which aligns with Saudi Arabia's control over global oil markets. Revelation 18 verse 24 speaks of persecution, which some connect to radical Islamic extremism and the persecution of Christians in the Middle East. The harlot riding the beast, Revelation 17, could symbolize a religious political system that rises to power in the end times, possibly involving the Islamic world. Could this mean that Ishmael's descendants play a central role in the prophetic Babylon system, influencing world events leading up to the return of Christ? 5. The rise of the Mahdi and a false Messiah. Islamic eschatology predicts the coming of the Mahdi, a messianic figure who will unite the Muslim world. Many Christians speculate that the Mahdi could be a counterfeit Christ or even the Antichrist. Islamic traditions state that the Mahdi will rule for 7 years, a possible counterfeit of the 7-year tribulation in Daniel 9 verse 27. The Mahdi is expected to lead an army against Israel and establish a global Islamic rule. Some Islamic teachings suggest Jesus will return as a prophet under the Mahdi, denying his divinity, paralleling the false prophet in Revelation 13 verses 11 to 18. Could Ishmael's descendants be instrumental in ushering in a false messianic figure who opposes Israel and deceives the world? 6. The final battle, Armageddon and Ishmael's role. The Battle of Armageddon, Revelation 16 verse 16, is described as a climactic war where the nations gather against Israel. Some suggest that Ishmael's descendants could be among these forces. Zechariah 14 verse 2 predicts that all nations will come against Jerusalem in the final battle. Joel 3 verse 2 mentions God gathering the nations to judge them for their treatment of Israel. Revelation 19 verses 19 to 21 describes the Antichrist's army gathering to fight against Jesus at his second coming. If many of these nations come from the descendants of Ishmael, it would mark the final fulfillment of the prophecy that Ishmael's hand would be against his brothers. Genesis 16 verse 12. 7. The hope of redemption, Ishmael and the gospel. Despite this tension, the Bible also speaks of God's love for Ishmael's descendants and their potential for salvation. Isaiah 60 verse 7 predicts that Ishmael's descendants, Midian, Sheba, and Kedar, will bring offerings to God in the Messianic kingdom. Many former Muslims are converting to Christianity, especially in the Middle East. Revelation 7 verse 9 describes a great multitude from every nation worshiping Jesus, suggesting that Ishmael's descendants will also be part of God's kingdom. Even though Ishmael's role in prophecy may seem adversarial, there is still hope for salvation for those who turn to Christ. Conclusion: Ishmael's prophetic destiny. The ancient conflict between Israel, Isaac's descendants, and Ishmael's descendants is not just historical. It appears to have prophetic significance. The ongoing Middle East conflict aligns with biblical prophecy. Ishmael's lineage may play a role in the rise of global deception and a final battle against Israel. The end times may see a climactic confrontation between these ancient brothers before the return of Christ. But even in judgment, God's mercy remains open to all who believe in Jesus, including Ishmael's descendants. Please subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.